Hey everyone, it's Steven. Today I have the 2021 Maserati Levante. First introduced in the 2017 model year, Maserati made this mid-size SUV to kind of compete in that growing market that they noticed back in the late 2010s. You can kind of see from a quick glance that this car has some very seductive styling here. This is a very attractive SUV. Maserati really hasn't made that many updates over the past 4 or 5 years to this car. In 2021, they did introduce a few slight tweaks to the front and rear fascia. And the big news though is the new tech. So we're using a new infotainment system, runs a lot better than the previous ones. I drove a Ghibli about 3 years ago or so, I think it was in 2017, and I mean that infotainment system was not good. But the new one, which is based off of Dodge's Uconnect system, is much smoother and much improved over the last generation. So I would highly recommend switching to a 2021 if you're thinking of getting a used one. 2021 or 2022 would be a great idea. So the Levante I have here is pretty much the cheapest Levante you can get. The Levante MSRP is for $78,000. This one has the driver assistance package, which gives you some nice features such as the 360 surround view camera, radar cruise control, and a few goodies like that. Definitely worth it for about $1,700, and that brings the total price of this to about $80,000. That is a lot of money, especially for a midsize SUV that competes with things like the BMW X6, even the Porsche Cayenne, right? Those undercut this by over $10,000 to $20,000. I mean, at this price, you can get an AMG GLE, right? It's kind of a crazy idea to spend that much money on a midsize SUV. So, I really wanted to see, is this car worth that $80,000 price tag? Because, I mean, from what I understand, it's more of a status symbol at this point, right? Like, you're getting a Maserati, you have that Trident, you know that it's going to be, it's going to turn heads, it's going to impress people, but, is it actually a good car for $80,000? All right, so for that $80,000 price tag, you do get a very nice Ferrari-derived engine. So this is going to be a 3-liter twin-turbo, and you heard that right, on a base trim, this comes with a twin-turbo V6. So unfortunately, the V8s will only, you'll only get the V8s if you step up to the higher trims, and those will actually be Ferrari engines, which is kind of crazy to put that in an SUV. But this one gives you 345 horsepower and 369 pound-feet of torque. That gets you 0 to 60 times of just under 6 seconds. For a car this huge and this heavy, that is insane. So, I mean, that's the cool part, right? You're giving $80,000, but you're getting a Ferrari-derived engine, an Italian sports car, right? That's just one of those things that people dream of, and I feel like that's a huge reason people stick to something like this. It's practical, way more practical than a Ferrari, obviously. This engine is mated to an 8-speed automatic transmission, and you get Maserati's Q4 all-wheel drive standard across the entire lineup. So every Maserati Levante you get is going to have all-wheel drive. I will say though that this is quite a fuel sipper. You don't really get the greatest fuel economy with this. You get 16 city miles per gallon and 22 highway miles per gallon. So, I mean, obviously you're not really buying a Maserati because you're trying to save gas or anything like that, but just know that this is not going to be something that can compete with something like the Cayenne, X6. Those are all going to get better fuel economy numbers than this. All right, so now let's talk about the exterior of this car. So I think the Maserati Levante really stands out in its class because, I mean, you've got that gorgeous front grille. This design is back from 2017, and we really haven't made that many changes to it, which is, I mean, kind of fascinating to see that it's almost 5 years old and it's still basically the exact same design as before. You've got these vertical slats that kind of run through. You've got that famous Trident logo, right? I mean, all of this stuff is fairly standard across the entire Maserati lineup. It's not the most special thing, but I do think it looks a lot better on the SUV than it does on their coupes or sedans. The headlight design isn't also my favorite. It's fine. I don't really think it's anything special, but it does look sleek, right? And I do like the aggressive look. You do have fully functional front vents. That is very exciting. You've got some really good stuff down there. Really going to cool that engine off. Of course, that twin turbo is going to be running very hot a lot of the time. Kind of moving on to the side profile of this car, you do have some 19-inch wheels. These are the base wheels, and I mean, they look good. Again, kind of like the headlights, right? I like them. They're sleek, they look good, but definitely not a standout in my opinion. This car actually does have the painted red brake caliper option, which is $500 extra, and I do think this adds a bit of flair to the, otherwise kind of plain wheels. The exterior of this car is what Maserati calls Bianca, which is going to be their white non-metallic color. So that's actually free of charge, their only free color. The interior is also Nero, their black interior. And I mean, I just don't really think the color combination is that great. You have white on black, and I mean, it just looks very plain. It doesn't really add anything. And I mean, that's why this car is about $80,000. Kind of similar to Porsche. You can customize Maseratis pretty much as you want. So I mean, there are going to be Levantes that can be almost, 1.5 times the price of this car and still be the exact same trim and car, but they'll have special silk interiors and stuff like that, and that's always kind of exciting. Moving on to the side profile of this car, you do have some pretty muscular body lines. I do like the, you know, the fenders over the wheels. I do think overall it looks nice and aggressive. You do have that coupe slope roof thing design that every car is kind of going for these days, and that's why it competes with things like the GLE Coupe, X6, Cayenne Coupe, things like that. And that does cut into the rear headroom a little bit, but I mean, otherwise it does give this a very aggressive appearance, and I think that's going to be what a lot of people want when they're driving a Maserati. And then kind of finally rotating back to the rear of the car here, you can kind of see that, I mean, the Maserati overall just isn't going to be the craziest looking thing in the back. I really wish they had a full light bar. I think that would be really nice, kind of like how the Porsche Cayenne looks. But you know, they have really nice chrome. The Maserati script looks very luxurious and fancy. You have a Q4 badging and of course the Levante badging as well. The taillights are going to be pretty standard LEDs, but you know, I think it looks just like everything else in the Maserati lineup, and I don't think that's ever a standout. I really think the front grille is going to be the biggest part. So, opening the trunk in the back, this is actually one of the worst parts of the Levante as well. I feel like there's a lot of things I keep saying that about. Fuel economy is not a good thing, but also trunk space is not great. For a mid-size SUV, this only has 20.5 cubic feet of cargo space. That is really low. I mean, the X6, GLE, Cayenne all have 25 cubic feet or more. And I mean, that kind of defeats the purpose of getting something this practical, I feel. But I mean, you'll still be able to fit a lot of carry-on bags in here. So definitely not something that you're going to feel like it's lacking, but compared to rivals, you could feel like that. You do get this really cool replaceable little, like, I don't even know what material this is, but it's kind of almost like cardboard and allows you to kind of keep your things from slipping in the back here. And you get some really interesting like holding slots in the very back as well. So I mean, it is a kind of a luxurious rear, but I mean, otherwise the, you know, again, the exterior of this car is really not something that's going to stand out aside from really the front of the car, in my opinion. So overall, the exterior of the car really isn't going to be that fascinating. It is going to turn heads just because it's a Maserati, but I mean, the engine is what people want to hear, right? So going down here, you of course have quad exhaust tips for the standard trim, and I mean, I think you really need that, right? I can't imagine a Maserati without quad exhaust tips. So I'll turn on the engine, rev it a little bit, and you guys can hear what that sounds like. So diving into the interior here, I wanted to start back there, so hopefully you can hear that exhaust note from idle. Sounds pretty good. I think that'll please a lot of enthusiasts out there. One thing you can quickly notice is that you have borderless windows, so that's always kind of interesting. It gives it a neat look, but it does make the cabin noise a little higher than I would like, in my opinion. Kind of going down here, you can already see that you have a not so impressive door panel, from my honest opinion. I wanted to show you guys what the key fob looks like as well. It is pretty hefty. I mean, this is quite large. It definitely fits in pockets, but it's a little large. You've got pretty standard things here. You've got remote start as well. So kind of jumping into the interior here, you can kind of see that, I mean, it's just not that impressive, right? I mean, I think honestly for me, when I first got in this interior, it was a bit underwhelming, but again, this is the very base Levante, pretty much the cheapest one you can get. So I didn't really expect too much, but these seats, super stiff. I mean, it's weird how stiff they are, and I feel like maybe it's to try and mimic a bit more of the sports car feel, but it was a little too thick in my opinion, and like, it just doesn't, I don't know, they're firm, and every one of my passengers who's gotten in this car has actually noted that they didn't like the seats, which is kind of ridiculous in an $80,000 car. You do have the nice, you know, logo embroidered on the headrest, which is always a nice touch, kind of just like a Porsche. I mean, Porsche and Maserati actually have a lot of similarities, so, I mean, but I just feel like I would take a Cayenne over this any day. But yeah, otherwise kind of just glancing around the interior, you do have some nice touches. I do like this analog clock there. The screen isn't too impressive. This is an 8.4-inch infotainment screen. Again, this is based off of the Uconnect system now, so it's actually a lot faster than it was before, which is really nice, right? Like, you know, things actually respond. If you've used the older ones, you can note that, like, they were a lot slower than this. But, you know, now, like, things actually, like, the vehicle settings are easy to navigate through. They actually make a lot of sense. I will still say, like, I mean, it's kind of weird because a lot of people hate on, you know, FCA or Stellantis product infotainment systems, but I do think they're really intuitive and they're easy to use. A bit more simple and less flashy than you know, things like the German competitors. You do have this interesting thing here where you can have two shortcuts here. So I have it set to the temperature outside and the surround view camera, which is definitely one that a lot of people will want to use. This is part of the driver assistance package, $1,700 package, I believe, which gives you some really good goodies like the 360 camera, which, you know, I feel like for a car this size is definitely worthwhile. And also, I believe it gives you adaptive cruise control, which is really nice. You have the buttons on the steering wheel here. But yeah, a few other things like lane keep assist, blind spot monitors, and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, that stuff is pretty important for a car this size, and I really think that for $1,700, that's definitely the one package I feel like would be a requirement for me. You do have pretty easy heated seat controls and heated steering wheel controls, two-way heated seats, and yeah, all this stuff is very easy to use, and I really do appreciate that. I really hope that we eventually get the 10.1-inch screen that the Ghibli has now. But you know, I assume Maserati is going to add that to the Levante eventually, maybe with a refresh coming up or something like that, because this is still the 2017 generation, so it could definitely use some upgrades at this point. So, I mean, starting with the steering wheel and kind of what the driver sees here, the display looks pretty nice, I feel, right? Like, I do like the Maserati logos in there. Again, this car really wants you to know that it's a Maserati, so it has the logos. I mean, if you could count, there's probably at least like 10 or 20 of them throughout the entire car. But you have a 7-inch digital display in the middle of your in the middle of your gauge cluster, which looks pretty nice. It is relatively configurable if you've used other Maserati products. It's quite similar. It's a little slow, and you do use, I don't know, this stuff is a little weird to kind of go around, but you know, overall, I think people get used to it pretty quickly. This is called the main menu display, but I really don't think it's that useful, so I usually end up using the driver assistance display, which actually has a bit more configuration because you can choose what shows up in the top left, top right, and some other things like that. So I don't know, looks pretty nice in my opinion, but again, nothing that's going to stand out. This I mean, if you got rid of the Maserati logos and you showed me this, I could believe that it's a, you know, Kia. So yeah, nothing too impressive there. Steering wheel is fine. It's a little bulky. You know, I wish it was flat bottomed. I feel like that would add a nice sporty feel. You don't have paddle shifters on this space trim, so if you want to get that, you definitely need to upgrade and get either the Grand Sport package or, you know, in the 2022 revamped trim lineup, you can get something like the Modena or something like that. But yeah, so you do have your adaptive cruise control settings here, and I'll actually show you guys a video while I talk about this. It worked really well on freeways. I was very impressed by that because I feel like a lot of cars don't put that much effort into their adaptive cruise control systems, even though they are very, very important, especially in a city like Houston here, where you have a lot of stop and go traffic. So I was very impressed with the system. It followed the lanes really closely. It was almost flawless. There were very few times where I feel like, I felt very comfortable with it, and it always kept me centered, and overall, just a really great system. So moving on to a few of the additional steering wheel features here, you do have hill control, which is standard, which is nice. You do have voice control. Maserati actually has intelligent voice control, so you can say a wake-up phrase, and I'm not going to demonstrate it here because that's actually going to stop my video if I do, because I'm connected to the wireless Apple CarPlay, which, by the way, is standard, which is really nice. But basically, you can say things like, hey, I'm cold, or, you know, turn on the AC, or, you know, like things like that, and it'll actually be able to adjust things for you. Turn on the heated steering wheel, you know, that's a pretty nice one. So yeah, I do like cars like that, but I still feel like it's a little slow, and honestly, it doesn't replace the need for a physical button. Again, I don't like that I have to actually touch this button up here to turn on the heated steering wheel. That's always, I guess it's not the most responsive thing, but, you know, it's frustrating that I have to go into a menu to open that. Like, I don't think that should be a thing. But anyways, kind of moving on right here, you do have the push to start button in the back here, which is kind of an interesting place to put it. You have your light controls right here. You do have two-way memory right there, if you can focus right there. Yep. It's a little weird to set it. You have to press the S and then you press the button, and you don't really hold anything. You just tap the buttons and then it saves the memory for you. You do have some nice like faux wood trim right here. It looks nice, but I mean, again, on this black interior, you can't really see it and it doesn't really stand out. I wish it was kind of brighter, because even in the bright sunlight, you can kind of see it's very dark brown. So it'd be nicer if it was a brighter brown, and I'm sure you could configure it to be like that. But again, that's the biggest thing with the Maseratis, right? You have to configure everything. You have a speaker cap down here, nothing special here. This one doesn't have the Harman Kardon sound system. I honestly haven't had the best experiences with that sound system, so I don't even know if I'd recommend upgrading to that. But I will say their bass sound system is definitely improved over the previous years, so I do think they're getting better, but I still don't think any Italian car, the Alfa Romeos, things like that, they're not really here to give you a good sound system, right? They're here to give you a good sounding exhaust. So that's kind of their biggest thing. You do have some physical controls here for climate, which I do like. I mean, I really think you need to stick with this, and I do think overall like, this has a nice look. You know, it does look luxurious. I think the screen could be a bit bigger. There could be some fancier stuff, but I mean, you know, it looks fine. I feel like I don't hate it. And at least they do have physical controls. You do have an interesting storage place. I have my mask right here, but you know, you do have a few different things here. I have noticed this thing gets very dirty easily, so I think kind of weird look, but this is actually a lot deeper than you would expect. And then your gear selector is pretty typical. I've got your Maserati logo again. You have some different drive modes right here. Traction control turning off ice. Ooh, I forgot what this stands for, but it's actually a really interesting acronym. But again, it's kind of as expected, it's for the slippery conditions. You have your sport mode, which is actually very loud. You can easily hear the exhaust opening up essentially when you press that button. And you have your sport suspension. This is a really fun one. And usually what this means is that you do have adaptive air suspension. How cool is that? So you can literally lift this car into, I think it's 5 different settings here. The lowest one right here is when you park, which is basically like, to help you get out of the car. And then you can go all the way to the highest, which happens when you go to the off-road mode. So it's really nice, and I'm really glad they have this standard. That is the one feature I would say screams luxury. You know, being able to change your suspension settings is really cool. You have your electronic parking brake here, and then you have your double dial here. The top one is basically for volume control, and the bottom one is for tuning and stuff like that. So you kind of see it actually has something that says that, but it's not the easiest to see. Overall, I really didn't use this much. The touchscreen works well enough for everything. It's not like BMW where I kind of felt like I could do both. For Maserati, I definitely think the touchscreen takes priority. You do have your glove box right here. Nothing fancy there, unfortunately. It's not electronically opened or anything. But yeah, again, just taking a look at this interior, right, it just doesn't look that nice. I don't really know what else to say about it. I mean, you have decent visibility, you know, and you do have a pano sunroof, which is really nice, but that would be expected out of the price point, right? All right, so let's head to the back seats. They're pretty similarly appointed. You don't have power controls back here, but I really wouldn't expect that. You've got a nice Maserati script right there that you can, of course, configure to light up and stuff. Mentioning lighting up, there is no ambient lighting in this car, which is disappointing. It's actually interesting because the settings do claim to have an ambient interior lighting thing, but it's just like, you know, a little bit of white in the footwells, and like you can't configure the colors or anything. So really not what I would consider ambient lighting, honestly. You do have some nice charge ports here, and you know, you have some nets here, which I don't know, don't feel that great, but it's fine. I feel like that's really the overall impression I have of the interior, is everything is just fine, except for the seats. I still will say, like, you know, even these rear seats back here are not comfortable. I really wouldn't like to be here for a long road trip. You do have ample legroom, I will say. Like, that is a very nice part, is like, you know, you've got, I don't know how much this is, but it's a lot, and you have a lot of headroom too. Even with the fact that it has a sloped roofline right here, you do have a decent amount of headroom for your rear passengers. So overall, you know, things are pretty normal. You do have a headrest for your middle passenger, which is always nice to see, especially for a larger car like this. So you can really have 5 actual adults in here. You've got some more cup holders here, and you do have a pass-through here, which is really nice. So you can actually reach things in the trunk if you need to. All right, I wanted to kick off the driving portion of this review with, you know, the reason you're buying a Maserati, right? For that rev sound. So we're gonna go 0 to 60 right here. 6,000, 7,000 RPMs. And that is so much fun. And you can hear that so well in the cabin. And I mean, that's half the reason this is so cool, right? This is a mid-size SUV. This is a huge car. And you're able to hit those revs, and it's just, it's kind of fascinating. It's phenomenal. So I will say, like, that's one of those things where it's like, I've had this car for about a week now, and at the beginning, you know, I was kind of upset with the, you know, stiff seats. Like, they hurt my back if I sit here too long. And, you know, things like that, and, like, you know, questionable build quality. You hear a lot of rattles in the back, and I don't know if that's, you know, specifically this car, but, you know, I've definitely heard some Stellantis products aren't, you know, up to snuff in terms of their build quality, and I kind of feel like this car doesn't feel the most well put together, but you get over those cons when every time you rev, right? It's just, and this is the base trim. I can't even imagine what it sounds like in the Trofeo GTS, things like that, right? Like, this is that twin turbo V6, and it's just such a great sound, and I feel like you will never get tired of that. So when you're just sitting at a stoplight, I mean, it's relatively quiet. The cabin is definitely insulated. I do think, you know, wind noise becomes a factor when you get up to speed and stuff like that, but otherwise when you're in a normal stoplight in a very, you know, quiet area or something like that, like, you really don't hear much, and it does feel luxurious. It feels like you're pretty isolated from the outside. Definitely feels like a luxury car. But, you know, and then you start revving and it sounds like a sports car, so that's always kind of fun. But, you know, otherwise, like, again, this car is definitely a head turner. Like, you will see people look at your car, and I mean, revving from 0 is always fun. Like, you know, that's only 0 to 40, but you know, it's still always a fun experience every single time you put your foot on that pedal, and you kind of feel like a sports car for a few seconds. But yeah, otherwise it's pretty quiet. The ride quality isn't the greatest, I would say. It is definitely on the firmer side, unfortunately, because, again, like, especially with the sport suspension turned on, you really feel those bumps. The car is quite low to the ground when you do have that sport suspension turned on. But I mean, the whole thing about this car, right, is that, like, I used it in comfort for a little bit, and then I put it in sport, put that sport suspension on, and pretty much that's all I use now, because it's just so much fun. It really feels like a sports car with the body of a mid-size SUV. And at the end of the day, the one thing that cannot be stressed enough is the fact that this has sports car DNA, literally, right? It's a Ferrari-derived engine. You know that this is completely engineered. This entire car is built around that performance factor. So even with all of my complaints about, you know, the ride not being the nicest and all that sort of stuff, it's not meant to be like that. This Maserati's target audience are people in general who really want that sports car DNA, but also the practicality of having a mid-size SUV. So, you know, and the thing is, there are going to be a lot of those people who are just chasing this for the clout, right? I think that's the biggest thing, is that there are going to be a lot of people who just want this for the Maserati logo. It's relatively affordable compared to other Maseratis, right? You know, do you want the new MC20 or do you want a Levante? Which one can you really afford? And I mean, the Levante is going to be a very easy choice. There's a reason this is the best-selling Maserati now. It sells much more than the Ghibli, and I mean, that's because you have this practicality, and I mean, I do think overall the actual Levante exterior still looks a lot better than the Ghibli. And I do want to give a really quick shout out to the incredible handling on this car. Again, sports car DNA. This car handles like such a smaller car, and I think that's incredible, right? With cars like this size, to be able to feel such minimal body roll, like when you're taking corners, you can corner this car so quickly, and like winding roads don't feel hard, and it's just incredible the speeds you can take corners at and still feel like you're completely in control. And you know, a lot of that is that Q4 all-wheel drive. A lot of it is just the way the sport suspension has been handled, and it's just a really nice experience put together. I do have to caution people who want this car as a luxury car, though. It just might not be the right fit, because, you know, there are other luxury cars like the Porsche Cayenne that are cheaper, much more luxurious, and they will feel more luxurious, right? I'm on a pretty decent road right now, and every bump in the road I can feel. And I mean, to be fair, that's because I'm in the sport suspension, but it's like, even in the comfort mode, you still feel a lot of those bumps, and if you really want that sort of cushy ride where you don't feel any bumps, this is not going to be the right choice for you. However, if you're looking for a car that is going to make you smile every single time you put your foot on the throttle, this is a very good car for that. It's relatively affordable, all things considered, for a Ferrari-derived Italian sports car engine, right? And overall, I mean, you're going to have a good experience with it. You just can't expect it to have that cushy luxury feeling that a lot of other cars in this segment are going to have. So that's going to be it for my review today. Really appreciate you guys watching this and checking out my channel. If you want to check out other videos, click up here. And if you want to subscribe, please subscribe down here. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you think about the Levante. I do think it's a very polarizing car, so I'm kind of curious to hear what people think. I feel like some people love this car and think it's, you know, the greatest thing ever, but some people are just like, this is ridiculous for $80,000, right? So let me know what you think, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.